Okay, AI is doing a whole bunch of stuff and making lots of things possible. It is generating photos and videos on just about any topic and analyzes massive amounts of data. But hey, can it really handle 3D modeling? Well, I went with Tripo.ai mainly because its latest update has really improved accuracy. I tested a few models with it, including this Yoda, and even tried adding materials in Substance Painter using a quick auto unwrap. Honestly, the results were surprisingly good. Just look at the detail on this boot, it's so well captured. Even the hollow section was correctly interpreted just from a single image. Now I gave it this stylized building to see how well it could handle proportions, and I've gotta say, I was impressed. The results were solid and the level of detail really stood out again. But what really blew me away was its helmet. Just check out how clean those hard edges turned out. All this helmet needs is a proper topology and it's good to go as a high quality model. And finally, this Leonardo character that totally tempted me to go all in and rebuild the model. Considering it was generated from just one photo, I'd say it gets a solid passing grade. I recommend not checking the topologize option and just go with FBX format when you download it. I brought the model into Blender and it reminded me of this scene. Gotta rewatch it sometime. It was clear right away that there were some major differences between the AI model and my reference, and I had to fix all of those. So back to our question, I'd say no. AI can give you a decent blockout that speeds up the modeling process and also gives you a head start. But when it comes to precision, topology, and texturing, you still got a long way to go. So first thing first, I hit the base of the figure using box height and lasso height. Then went into edit mode to unhide and separate those parts. I also separated swords, so now I had 3 clean chunks to work with. Body, swords, and base. I used fill holes to clean up the gaps in the base so I wouldn't run into issues later on. For flattening the top of the base, I used Line Project and got rid of those extra edge loops with a simple remesh. Did the same thing to the bottom part and scaled it a bit. For character's body, I started by fixing some of the rough blackout issues. I only used the grab brush with topology enabled, so the edits only affected the area I clicked on, and also softened sharp edges and cleaned up anything that didn't quite match the reference. Then Ctrl R again to do a quick remesh and make it a bit cleaner and adjust the proportions to match the reference more closely. There's no need for dense topology at this stage. So after refining and smoothing out the mesh, I started using clay strips to roughly lay down some main details. And yeah, this back and forth process just kept going. Fingers. First I masked them out, inverted the mask, and then used grab to pull them out. And after another remesh, I used inflate brush to thicken them up, because they were looking very skinny. Shell. I had previously flattened the shell, so I masked it out, inverted the mask, and pulled out the unmasked parts to match the reference better. I used relax option from mesh filter, just a little to smooth things up, and did another quick remesh. Eyemask. As you can see, I cleaned it up quite a bit. If you want the edges of your mask to be sharper, just press A and select Sharpen Mask a few times. Now, by using Mask Extract option, you can actually turn that painted mask into a whole new mesh. Blender does this using a Solidify modifier, so I just renamed the new object, gave it a little smooth action to clean up the edges, and then applied the modifier. Sculpting. Then I moved on to smaller details. Most of it was done with just clay strips and smooth. No fancy brushes or anything wild. So here I turned on Dyntopo so I'd have enough density in the sculpted areas to make clean cuts using crease sharp brush. This way I didn't need to remesh the entire model with insanely high density. This is something you'll get the hang of, knowing whenever you actually need it. If you want to draw a really clean line, just enable Stabilize Stroke and tweak the settings a bit. Now it was time to bring out the muscles and break up the overly smooth surface of the body. And Draw Brush worked great for that. I also used Draw Sharp where I needed more consistent, defined lines. Then came the usual routine again. Masking, cleanup, and extracting the mask. Okay, next I went back to the fingers, which still look kind of mannequin-like. First I used Inflate, then posed them a bit using Pose Brush. And Scrape Multiplane Brush came in handy for flattening some of the subtle surfaces. Just a few tweaks with Grab helped refine finger joints, and that was pretty much it. Nothing fancy here. Finally, I masked both hands from the rest, hit them with Inflate again, because honestly, they still didn't feel like proper Ninja Turtle hands. As for the gloves, well, you already know how those were made. Back to the body, I added more defined details using Draw and Draw Sharp. And just to highlight again, when I needed those super sharp cuts, I used Crease Sharp. It's way more intense than Draw Sharp. And for the glove straps, I roughly plugged them in using clay strips. Gotta admit, I didn't spend a ton of time here. I used Crease Sharp for the lines between them, and then pinch to tighten them up. I carved out the eye mask using a lasso trim tool. Pay attention to the settings I used. And I softened the edges a bit too, so they wouldn't be overly hard. Then I tried sculpting over the eye mask to bring it closer to the reference. Behind the head, I added a simple cylinder to make the knot of the eye mask. Now for tails. A bezier curve was added, scaled along the y-axis and flattened out. And a vertex just adjusted to match the reference and extruded to get more curve and shape for the rest of the eye mask. Next, a plane was added, scaled and its scale applied. After making a few tweaks to it, the inside was deleted to keep only the outer edges, which were then converted into a curve. Then back to the curve, this was selected and assigned a bevel modifier under the data tab, with that same plane used as the bevel object. Now, any vertex on the curve can be rotated using Ctrl-T, and to scale each vertex individually, use Alt-S. Also, scaling the reference curve affects the entire object size. Next, it became clear the two ends of the band were enjoined, so everything needed to be selected and merged by distance. For the second tail, a copy was made from the previous one and tweaked to match the reference more closely. Then I added two subdivision levels. You better know in sculpt mode, Blender applies multi-res instead of subdivision surface. So after applying the modifier and doing a quick remesh, things were intentionally roughed up a bit. The same method was repeated for the build, using a circle wrapped around the character's waist. I built it exactly the same way with the previous technique. No extra stuff added. Alright, time for swords. I thought it would be cool to use a curve again. Started by shaping the base form, then applied a bevel. This time I used an ellipse for the sword's bevel profile and made the section a bit smaller. And a different profile was created for the handle too. Since the sword was still a curve, it had to be converted to a mesh to get access to edit mode and make further changes. These final pieces were modeled pretty simply. Honestly, not even sure what they're supposed to do. In the end, I joined everything, remeshed it, smoothed it, and used the inflate brush to shrink the spaces between them. Now handle. The last part of the sword handle modeling was done with knife tool, where I drew two lines on the handle. Here press C to activate cut through to apply the cuts to both sides of the handle. After that, I deleted the mirror half with Ctrl-X and separated the edges I created. Then I moved it closer to the origin and made some changes, aiming to simulate the knots of the handle. Next, I added an empty object to mirror the knot using array modifier. First, I unchecked the relative offset box and linked the empty to array modifier. Then I changed the x-axis to -1 to mirror the knots. Now I did the exact same thing for z-axis as well, so the knot closed properly. After that, I applied all modifiers and symmetrized the model. Be careful with the axis alignment. Now I needed to apply the curve modifier to the sword handle, which I previously copied. So adding another array modifier and swapping modifiers positions, the knots would align precisely on the handle. I even inflated the knots a little to make them less thin and deactivated the y-axis to prevent any changes in that direction. So I rotated the sword and placed it in position. Finalized. For the base, I didn't do anything fancy, just whipped it up real quick using some custom brushes and a bit of help from Grab Brush. I decided to add some cuts and wounds on the body. I reactivated Dyn Topo, used Crease Sharp to create the wounds, and pinched the ends to make them smaller. And finally, I added the small details for the fingers too. For this project, I decided not to unwrap and use vertex colors instead, meaning painting directly on the vertices with no textures involved. Colorize. You probably know that this method requires a lot of vertices and high density. So using the color filter, a base color was applied to each part, with darker shades filling the valleys to enhance the sense of depth. Lighter colors were used on the edges and centers to highlight the peaks. Holding Shift helped blend the colors a bit to create some nice shading effects. And the same approach was used for the eye mask. Okay, the sword needed more attention, because it had more details like dirt and a wide range of colors. For its dirt, the Musgrave texturing blender was used, mixing dark and light tones. You'll need to play around with texture sizes to make sure the details get painted properly. The base was quickly given a general color, then using the mask menu, Mask by Cavity was applied to select all the cavities, followed by a green shade close to the reference. After that, Mask by Cavity was applied again, but with the custom curve option to tweak the mask. Then a lighter green was used on the edges, but a little smoothing was done with the color filter. For the body, the same method was applied, with darker green shades near gray added, and manual dirt was applied to certain areas with varying intensities and colors. As for the eyes, they were kept closed because it seemed to suit the character's seated pose better. The rest of the model didn't have anything special, just applying dark and light colors to the appropriate areas. I didn't separate the yellow parts of the model and its shell for painting. I could have done that, but since I painted the borders carefully, there wasn't really a need to split them. And finally, for the shell, I used the same method as the gloves, starting with a dark base color and then highlighting the raised areas with lighter shades. So here it is, the result of a few days of sculpting and painting. even though you only saw about 15 minutes of it. Now it's your turn. This is AI model and this is mine. So based on the reference, did I get close enough? Let me know in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe.